Hello everyone. Okay, so I don't know what the weather's like in your part of the world, but right now in mine it is very cold and very wintry. So today we're going to talk about dahlias, and not only because they will brighten up kind of a winter day, but because if you want to grow specific kinds of dahlias this year, you're going to want to be shopping for those probably now or very soon. So if you are new here, my name is Erin. Here on the Impatient Gardener, we talk about inspiration and education for real life gardeners like I am and probably like you are too. I live in a zone 5, southeastern Wisconsin, but much of the information I have applies to a much broader range of areas than that. Okay, let's get right into dahlia talk. So first of all, I'll just put out a couple of caveats here. The first thing I want to say is that any dahlia is a lovely flower, and I think almost all of them are worthwhile plants to grow. And so if you don't want to get heavy into dahlias and start picking specific varieties and really getting into kind of a dahlia obsession like I have, feel free to just go to your local garden center. Even some big box stores often have dahlia collections or specific dahlias there once we're into spring. So you can do that then too. You don't have to feel obligated to order a whole bunch of specific dahlias. My guess is once you do that once, you will want to order a whole bunch of specific dahlias because dahlias have a way of sucking you in and you want to try them all. You can also grow dahlias from seed. The thing to know when you grow dahlias from seed, which I did last year for the very first time, they grow pretty easily from seed. I started them ahead of time inside and then planted them out because they do take a while to get going. But the main thing to know about when you grow dahlias from seed is that you won't get a specific variety. So when you buy seeds at whatever seed place you're buying from, it will probably have a general theme to it. It'll probably be like a butterfly mix, and it'll be a whole bunch of single dahlias in a variety of colors. That's because dahlias cross very easily. So the seed, unless it's grown in a place where they are restricted and pollinators can't get from one plant to another, you're not sure what you're going to get, which is very fun, by the way. It was really exciting last year when I grew dahlias from seed to see what popped up. It was super fun, and I actually saved one of the tubers that came out of those seed-grown dahlias last year. And that's the other thing. Seed-grown dahlias typically will produce tubers, which you can save if you want that exact same flower, because when you grow dahlias from a tuber or from a cutting, you are getting a clone of that plant. So what I'm sharing with you today is all the varieties that I'm personally going to grow this year. These are ones that I've saved or have already purchased new for delivery in April. So before we get into varieties, I just want to quickly talk about dahlia sources. And the great news is that there's so many places between small and big selling dahlias now that it's much easier to find a wider variety of types of dahlias, which is great for those of us who really want to get something interesting. I typically start my dahlia buying at Longfield Gardens. Now, I do work with Longfield Gardens sometimes, but I want you to know that that partnership led out of me being a longtime customer of Longfield Gardens. And the reason I start at Longfield Gardens is that they do a nice balance of having really nice tubers at a relatively reasonable price. Now, I have paid up to $25 for a single dahlia before, but that's obviously not what I like to do for most of my dahlias, especially when you see how long this list is. So price is obviously a factor. They also have a pretty broad selection, and in most cases they package their dahlias in threes, which is really nice because honestly, the only time I ever buy a single dahlia tuber of one variety is if I'm either trying it out for the first time and I want to see if I like it, or if it's so expensive that the only way I really feel good about doing it is to buy a single one, save the tubers, and divide them and get more down the line. After that, then I tend to go to some of the smaller dahlia farms to buy my tubers. I'll put a whole list of them below. There are more and more and more each day, so I'm certain I'm going to miss some really great ones, and every day I find new ones. You can also look at Swan Island dahlias. They are a very large dahlia carrier, very nice dahlias, a huge selection. And apparently they have an open day where you can go to their garden, and apparently it's absolutely spectacular. So I probably need to make it a point to get to there. So those are sort of the main places that I shop from. Again, check the description for some links to some of these. Do keep in mind though that a lot of the smaller growers have a very limited number of what they can sell. In most cases, when they open up their dahlia sale, they sell out within hours, or at least in that first day. So just know that going in so you don't get disappointed. And my last tip for you is, if you are looking for a specific dahlia, there is a website called Dahlia Addicts. And Dahlia Addicts is a clearinghouse for dahlia varieties. And basically sellers can go into Dahlia Addicts, put their varieties into there, and then it will list them. So you can search by variety and see all of the places that are selling that dahlia who have at least told Dahlia Addicts about it. And that is a great way to find a variety that you really have your heart set on. And we're going to get to one of those that I am hunting down. Okay, enough of that. Let's get into the varieties I'm growing this year. We're going to go shortest to tallest. And I'm doing that because I find that the shorter dahlias are much easier for me to work into my garden as a garden plant rather than a standalone area. And I prefer to grow my dahlias right in the middle of all of it, so I'm around them all the time. I do have a couple of places where I grow very tall varieties, and I do have a little bit of room in my vegetable garden to just grow a couple that maybe aren't going to fit somewhere else, and that would be mostly for cutting purposes. As we go along here, I will share the technical classification of that flower if I know it. I'm not very good at those classifications, and that's mostly because I don't show dahlias. Those are typically used when you show a dahlia. There are certain classes that you enter in. I don't grow dahlias competitively. I just grow them because I love them. The first two I want to share with you are new to me. They're from a series called Melody. It's 24 inches tall. I'm very excited about these because I find there is a shorter series of dahlias called the Gallery series, which tends to be like 14 inches tall, and I find that to be quite short for in the garden. Very good for containers, but quite short for the garden. So this, to me, this 24 inch tall seems really nice for the front of the border. The first one is Melody Swing. This is an apricot gold. It's kind of got pointy petals, and it looks like it's more gold in the center in the picture and kind of salmon-y color on the edges, right up my alley. And the next one is called Melody Pink Allegro. This is sort of an informal decorative one, and they claim that this has 4-inch flowers on it, which is mind-boggling to me, that there's going to be a 4-inch flower on a 24-inch tall plant, but that will be spectacular. This is all shades of pink, light to bright pink, basically. Next up is Milena Fleur. This is salmon with yellow centers, and very noticeably different. It's not like it blends. It's like it's yellow and then it's salmon. Quite interesting looking on that one too. That one is going to be, now you're talking 24 to 30 inches tall on that. Next up is another new one to me. This is called Rebecca Lynn. It's a bright fuchsia ball dahlia, small ball, 2.5 inches. So a little bit bigger than what would be classified as a pom-pom dahlia, but still quite small, 24 to 30 inches tall. And I'm growing this one not because I necessarily love that super bright pink color, but because I think it will go really well in both bouquets and the garden because it'll add a little bit of variety size-wise. A lot of the dahlias that I grow are in that 3 to 4 inch wide flower size. And so even though they all are different colors and different shapes, they tend to sort of blend in, I think. So I think this will add a nice little punctuation both in the garden and bouquets. Next up is possibly my favorite dahlia, and I would say if I have a signature dahlia, it's this one. It's called Crichton Honey. If you guys have followed me, it's the, you know I talk about this dahlia all the time. It is the dahlia that's the header on the YouTube page. It's everywhere, and I love Crichton Honey. Crichton Honey is a nicely sized ball dahlia. It's about 30 inches tall. So usually, sometimes it gets a touch taller than that, but usually I can get away with just a very minimal stake right at the bottom of it just to kind of keep it in the general right direction. No big rigs required for that one. And the colors, it's a nice tight ball. Colors vary from a very light yellow to a dark salmon. And what's interesting is that the colors change quite a bit depending on how much light it's getting and depending on the time of year. So I find that it tends to get very light yellow in fall, and sort of hot summer, you might be seeing that really dark salmon. But most of the time, what it is a variation of the two of them. It just looks like a tropical sunset to me. I adore that dahlia. So those are all, it's a hard dahlia to find. I don't know why. I will be using all the ones that I have stored for many years for that. And I like to grow those. I like that one so much that I tend to plant 5 or 6 of those right at the front of the border. And the way the sun catches them in the morning, so good. Next up, another favorite of mine, HS Date. This is probably my favorite single dahlia. The single dahlias should not be overlooked. I tell people this all the time. They are gorgeous. They don't look like a dahlia in terms of what you might envision in your head for a dahlia, but we're talking 30 inches tall, no staking needed. And the best thing about them is they have super dark foliage, very dark olive to almost blackish purple foliage. So they're a really good garden plant because even when they're not blooming early in the year before they start to bloom, you get that nice foliage accent in your garden. That's part of this HS series. HS stands for Happy Single. I have another one called, I think, First Kiss. It's very similar. It's a little bit more apricot-y. I don't think you can go wrong with any from that series. It's really excellent. Next up, and new to me this year, is another ball dahlia. We're still short here. We're talking 30 to 36 inches tall on this one. And it's described as a primrose yellow. I sort of think of it as kind of a sunshine yellow, but it's a pale yellow. Most gardeners, I think, are wary of yellow because sometimes if it's very gold, it doesn't necessarily go with what else is in your garden. I feel like this is one of those yellows that's going to blend well with everything else. And it's a ball dahlia, probably my favorite form of dahlia, at least for the moment. And so I just can't get enough of those. Next up, and coming in at 3 feet tall, is another new to me cactus dahlia. This one's called Cactus Tamburo. This is apparently a replacement for, okay, I'm going to get the heat now because every time I say the name of this dahlia, all the people who speak way better French than I do come after me. Nuit d'état. It's a replacement for that. At least that's how it's listed on the Longfield site, as a replacement for that. It's similar. It's a dark, dark, dark burgundy cactus dahlia. I think it's really important to, even though I tend to favor the apricot, peach range of colors or orange range of colors, I think it's really important to bring in some dark dahlias. The thing I love about this is it's not even 3 feet tall, so I feel like it's going to be much easier to work into the main part of the garden. Nuit d'état was tall, really, for me, very tall and difficult to work in. Next up, brown sugar, another ball dahlia. You will find me talking a lot about ball dahlias here. I do love them. 3 feet tall, described as rusty coppery orange. It's, there's like almost brown tones in there. It's a very fall toned color. One of those colors that I think is going to look really neat, and it's a nice tight ball, really tight petals, perfectly formed ball. And then coming in at 36 inches is a repeat from last year, Zundert Mystery Fox, and called that because it changes colors and it's almost impossible to describe the color. Generally speaking, it kind of developed for me last year as a kind of a burnt orange, but sometimes went quite bright pink on some of the petals. Very interesting, nice ball. I really enjoyed working that into bouquets last year. It bloomed really well. Interesting enough to redo for sure. Okay, this next group is, now we're getting into, you're gonna have to stake a territory. We're generally between 36 and 40 inches on most of these. So again, you're not gonna need a really heavy duty stake, but you are gonna have to plan on staking these. But still very good for working into a garden because they will hold up on top of a lot of other plants. First up is Bloomquist Dave. The Bloomquist series is a really beautiful series that I've not grown before, bred by a person called Paul Bloomquist. Bloomquist Dave is kind of a coral color. It's considered an informal ball, and it has sort of a goldy yellow center. I mean, I see this in the pictures as veering way more towards the salmony pink side of things, but I fell in love with it in a big bouquet, so now it's going to be mine. Bloomquist Dreamer is part of that same series as well. This is a semi-cactus, and I think you'll notice there's a few cactuses in my group, more than I've grown in the past. And I'm doing that because I think with so many dahlias, I really need to get some texture variation, and the cactuses are interesting to me. This is a 36 to 48. This is on Dreamer, and it's called Golden Peach. Again, yellow center going out to a salmon color on the edges in the pictures anyway. Castle Drive is 36 to 48 inches tall, and this is one that I saw over Instagram last year and sort of made a mental note that I needed to get that. This is described as light pink to blush. I think you can think of this as similar colors to Cafe au Lait and blend in quite well with Cafe au Lait. Next up is kind of an interesting one, again new to me. This is Fairway Spur. This is a huge flowered dahlia, but it only grows 3 to 4 feet tall, which is unusual. Typically the really big ones tend to be quite tall. So this is really going to be interesting to work into the garden. I describe this color in the photos as mango peach, a solid color throughout, and really nice twisty petals. I think it could be very fun to grow this one and experiment with this one. Next up is a variety I've been trying to get my hands on for about 3 years, and I finally got it ordered this year. It is called Apple Blossom. It's a collarette type, which means it has single petals with kind of fluffy bits in the middle. It's so pretty. I learned about this one from Floret Flowers. I bet you that's where most people discovered this one and probably why it's as hot as it is. It's exactly the color that you would think a dahlia that is named Apple Blossom would be. It's, you know, light yellow with a little bit of pink in it, maybe a little bit of peach in it. The only issue with this one is that it's 40 to 48 inches tall, and I really wish it were shorter because this is one I would love to have front and center in the garden, but at that height, it's going to have to be back a little farther. Hopefully it will produce a lot of flowers. A lot of the singles and collarettes are very floriferous, so they really keep going all year. So hopefully this one will produce a whole bunch of flowers for me. So Labyrinth is a dahlia that I stumbled upon maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I was coming off of a love affair with Cafe au Lait and had thought I would never find another dahlia that I liked as much as that one. And then came along Labyrinth, and I describe the colors and the sort of shape of Labyrinth as being sort of like Cafe au Lait, but where someone just turned up the saturation on it. It is beautiful, bright, vibrant pink and coral color, a little bit of twisty petal on it, and I'm telling you, it is such a statement. It is such a looker. It gets about 40 inches tall in my garden, maybe 36 to 40, so actually doesn't need a ton of staking structure, but it definitely needs some. It's actually too short for me to grow with some of my really tall growing ones because it just looks odd in that mix, so I have to mix it in elsewhere in the garden. It's a lot of look. You're definitely going to want to place it carefully because the colors are really vibrant. Linda's Baby is about 40 inches tall, and this is one that I've grown for the last 2 years. I will grow it again. It's a lovely ball. It is very similar in color to Crichton Honey. When Crichton Honey has its more coral or salmon colors going on. I think it actually probably is a better looking flower than Crichton Honey during that period. It's got a little bit tighter ball on it, but it's taller. It's 40 inches, so that's why I tend to lean more towards Crichton Honey, because Crichton Honey doesn't necessarily need to be staked, and Linda's Baby definitely does. Creme de Cognac, which is a great name, is a decorative dahlia. It's peach, butterscotch, and copper is how the colors are described on this. I mean, when I look at it, I definitely see peach, and then I see kind of a dark underside to it. I think it's really cool. It's kind of a bicolor looking one to me. New to me this year, and that's going to get 40 inches tall. Okay, now we're into the next section. This is basically the 4-foot range. One of these gets up a little taller than that, but generally you're looking at 4 feet for this next bunch here. First is Rose Toscano. This is a dusty rose peach. I don't see a lot of the rose in it. I see a lot of the peach in it, but it's a muted, dustier color, not quite as vibrant as some. And it's, of course, a beautiful ball, which is why I fell in love with that. After that, we've got Ferncliff Copper. Ferncliff Copper is, by the way, we're coming into a period here where you're going to see a color theme developing. Is a soft copper orange. That's the description on that one. But the description that really got me that I found for it was one that called it sort of creamsicle colors. Looks almost a little stripy to me. Very light, sort of peachy orange, moving into kind of a dark center, raspberry colored center. That one looks quite pretty. And that one is considered a formal dahlia. We've got 2 from the Jowie series here. Every one of the dahlias I've grown from the Jowie series has been really good. In the past, I've grown Jowie Morella. It's a dark ball. It's really fabulous. I am not going to grow that again this year. I decided to swap out to try that dark cactus, and I just can't grow them all. But that's a great one too. All these Joey series though are in the, they're pushing 4 feet in most cases. Sometimes it's 40 inches to 4 feet, but they're taller. Joey Winnie is one that I grew last year. Now it's described as sort of a raspberry peach ball. I grew it in kind of a shadier spot last year, and it was very much a clear pink. I'm going to say Pepto-Bismol pink maybe, which isn't the most flattering description. So when I showed a picture of it last year, I had a lot of people come to me and argue that that was not it. I am telling you, that was absolutely it. It was just growing in a spot where it wasn't in full sun. And so that's another thing to consider, is that these colors, they might not always be true to what you see in the photos, and that could be the circumstance in which they're growing. After that, we've got Joey Nikki. This is new this year. This is an apricot peach ball. All of those are great balls. Nice tight balls on those. Platinum Blonde I grew last year. This is an anemone type. I hope that this tuber holds. I grew one last year. The tuber was quite weak, and it produced 2 flowers, but they were really cool. It's white flowers with a fluffy light yellow pom-pom in the middle. It's a fabulous flower. I wish it weren't 4 feet tall. It would be the perfect dahlia to me if they could get that to 30 inches tall, because it's really fun. So if the tuber that I grew last year that I saved, I only got 1 out of it, overwinters well, I'll be growing that one again. One of the series of dahlias that I've gotten really into in the past 2 years is a series bred by Kristen Albrecht. You can follow her on Instagram at Santa Cruz Dahlias. She's doing some really great breeding. I think she breeds mostly for cut flower people and the show bench. That doesn't matter. You can grow any dahlia you want, no matter what the breeder was intending. I'm sure I think every breeder would be more than happy to see their dahlias in anyone's regular old garden. So they're very interesting. I have to buy these. The only place I can find these when they come out is from a place called Stonehouse Dahlias that sells rooted cuttings. Grew them last year from rooted cuttings. The plants grew fabulously, performed wonderfully. Unfortunately, of the 4 that I grew from rooted cuttings, only 1 produced savable tubers. I don't know how that worked, and I don't know what happened exactly, but only 1 of them produced a tuber that was even possible to save. And because these KAs, Kristen Albrecht is these are relatively new releases. They're just getting out, so there is no stock to be able to go buy tubers of these. You have to buy them by cuttings, because there just aren't enough tubers out there at this point to go buy. They're very pricey. It's a bit of an investment. So first one, Mocha Maya. One I really wanted last year and I couldn't get. It was sold out, so I had to swap for something else. It's an informal decorative. It's all sorts of, I think you can see in the picture, it's all sorts of colors. There's definitely pinks and yellows. And to me, again, this is very Cafe au lait inspired. Sierra Glow is 4 feet tall, and it is a cool dahlia. When I bought it, it was, wherever I bought it from 2 years ago, it was known as Peachy Salmon Dinnerplate, because it had not had an official name yet. But since then, it's been renamed Sierra Glow. Big flowers, relatively short plant, 4 feet tall for a big flowered plant. And it looks, this is a bright orange sunset with kind of little hints of yellow and pink and little flecks in it, and it's a good one. And the last one that falls onto this category, which is 4 feet, maybe a little over 4 feet, is Snownodoris, a ball dahlia, coral peach apricot. You recognize the theme. I fell in love with this picture because some Dahlia Society had a photo contest, and the most adorable picture of a frog sitting on Snowhodoris won the contest. And the picture was great, but the dahlia was fabulous. So that's why I bought that one this year. Next up, now we're on to big guys. This is stand them up, give them a really good steak. I grow most of these along the skinny bed on the south side of our house, right along the patio. I grow, if you guys have seen that part of the garden before, that's where I grow all the tall ones. It's a little easier to manage there because they are protected by the house, and I have drip in there, so they get consistent water. Those really big ones can be fussy. They aren't going to produce as many flowers as the smaller ones. And they just get a little, to me, they get a little fussier about things. But these are generally where the ones that we know as Dinnerplate dahlias, where I put them, because sometimes their heads are very heavy too. It's just difficult for me to work those into the garden. So that's where I grow most of those. First up is Islander. I ordered 2 of these, which is unusual for me when I'm first trying out a dahlia. This is a giant salmon pink with ruffled petals. I think this is going to be a big showy dahlia. Most of these dahlias that we're getting into here, or many of these I should say, are going to be giant flowers where like one flower makes a bouquet. Next up, Peaches and Cream. This is a 5-footer. Okay, considered a formal decorative. I am exclusively buying this one because all the dahlia people on Instagram won't stop talking about how amazing it is. I look at the pictures and I'm not sure I actually think it's all that great. It's peach and then at the tips, the petals kind of fade out to white. Everybody says it's fabulous, so I had to decide for myself, so that's why I ordered that one. I'm pretty sure I bought terracotta because I was shopping for other... I'm pretty sure I bought this next one, which is called terracotta, because I saw it on the screen and I was shopping and it ended up in the cart. Considered a semi-cactus, and it's terracotta colored with kind of a dark center. It's described on the Floret website as having hints of lavender and purple stems. We'll see. The thing that really got me about this one is everyone says it's an extremely productive dahlia. So especially when we get to these taller ones. Now this is not going to be a particularly big flower in this. I think it's like 4 to 5 inches. But if we're going to get to the thing where I have to deal with a tall dahlia and everything that's involved in that, productivity is important to me. I want that thing pumping out flowers. Camino, I keep wanting to say Camino, but Camino Cloud is a really buff to very light peach cactus. I fell in love with this one. I think that form is pretty stellar on that one. Flowers are said to be 4 to 6 inches wide, and again, we're still in the 5-foot range here on flowers. Next one up is another one of Kristen Albrecht's breedings, and this one's called Champagne. This is a stellar form. This is not a term I am familiar with in terms of dahlia classifications, but I think in the picture you'll see that it kind of bends around and it's got very fluffy petals. I think this is very similar in color to the other one I'm getting, Mocha Maya. Maybe a slightly more pink on it. I just like to play around with some of these new and exciting ones. Okay, would any dahlia discussion be complete without talking about Cafe au lait? I have to say, I'm certain Cafe au lait is like the #1 dahlia in the country. Everybody loves it. There's a reason everybody loves it. It's really good, you guys. Now, more than any other dahlia I grow, Cafe au lait changes colors on me. And it has a lot to do with how much light it's getting. I think it has everything to do with how much light it's getting, honestly. One year when I had a really good Cafe au lait year, I had basically from very light buff to very dark pink, and many of these were on the same plant. So with Cafe au lait, there's a range. I find too that as you get later in the season, again, when the days are shorter and there's less light, it tends to go way more towards buff than it does towards pink or any of those other colors. It often has these nice little swirly petals in the center, and really there's no reason not to grow it. It's a great dahlia. There's a reason why everybody knows Cafe au lait, because it's a fabulous dahlia. The next 2 are part of the Penn Hill series, which I just discovered and quite love. The first is Penn Hill Dark Monarch. This was the first one I had, and if I have to pick one of these that's my favorite, that's probably it. It ranges from orange to pink, but the cool thing about the Penn Hill series is that there's striations on the petals. So once you really get in there and look, first of all, it almost looks like it glimmers. But second of all, it's a really complex color, which I think makes it very easy to work into a bouquet, but also just really exciting and interesting. The second one is Penn Hill Watermelon. This one gets tall. In fact, one year I grew this and I would say it was easily 7 feet tall. It was huge. And the first flower I picked off, and now flowers tend to get, and some of these big ones, the first flower is usually the biggest and then they start getting a little smaller. But I measured that first one. It was 11 inches across on that very first Penn Hill Watermelon flower I got. You don't get a lot of flowers, but what you get is going to be pretty spectacular. Breakout is right up there with a favorite for me. Again, Similar colors to Cafe au lait, although clearer in color, not the cafe part of Cafe au lait, basically. Wider petals and flat, and it tends to look right out at you. Some dahlias have a tendency to sort of look down or straight up. It tends to hold its flowers almost perpendicular to the stem, so they look right out at you. Wide petals that range from a really nice buttery yellow, so maybe even I would say a lighter yellow than that even. Let's say whipped butter yellow, to bright pink but clear, unmuddy colors. Really a great one. And Thomas Edison, which is I'm certain you'd call it purple, because it is the best purple dahlia I have ever grown. I don't grow a lot of purple dahlias. Obviously, you haven't really seen any other ones in here, but it's fabulous. It's a nice big one, gets beautiful purple flowers, and there's something about purple petals on a dahlia that it truly looks like velvet. It just sort of has that sheen to it. Really lovely. So that wraps up my list of dahlias I'm going to grow this year. I am going to resist. I'm not looking at any more dahlia sites because I clearly have too many the way it is. I'm probably actually missing some that I saved. There are some that just aren't going to make the cut this year. I had too many dahlias last year. I grew about 100 dahlias last year. That is too many. I would guess I have at least that many here. So some things are going to have to get rehomed, or I'll have to find a different place to grow some of them. But there's one other dahlia that I just wanted to talk about. I have been looking for this dahlia for years. I found it last year and I ordered it from a very big plant company, and the tubers were not good. It did not grow. I had 2 tubers. They were both duds. So I am searching for a better source for this flower. It is called Waltzing Matilda. It is a pointy single dahlia with dark foliage, kind of in that coral to raspberry color. And it is one that every time I see a picture of it, I immediately go, I have to have that dahlia. So I'm going to try again this year to look for it. I looked on Dahlia Addicts. There are a few places. The one place that has already sold it is sold out. There's a few places that have sales coming up in March that I'm going to try to snag it on. But that's sort of my wish list dahlia this year. Everything else I've pretty much managed to get or decided I can do without this year. But that's one I would really like to add to my garden because I think that'd be a great garden plant. So I have done a ton of videos on dahlias, particularly how I grow them, how I store them, all of those things. I'll put links to a couple of those there, but you can always search the channel and just type in dahlias and oodles of videos will come up for you. I would say the key thing to know right now is that if you're looking for specific varieties, get on ordering them now, because you won't be able to find them later, or you probably won't be able to find them later. One of the beautiful things is that a lot of people are getting into growing dahlias, and that's good for you if you are a dahlia grower, because a lot more varieties are more available now. Okay, so that's the rundown on the dahlias I'm growing. I hope you are having a great day in your garden, or maybe just thinking about your garden. If you like this video, do me a favor, give it a like. It really does help a lot. I appreciate it, and I hope you are having a good time dreaming about dahlias today. See you soon. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. I'll put some links to some of the most commonly asked